thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation, Rorik, and for the invitation. I is glad to be here with you and to share the work that have been doing CEMEX in the last 24 years in the Carmen Nature Reserve. That I want to share the screen to start to speak a little bit about it. And you let me know when you see the screen. Everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. So this is more or less the landscape of El Carmen Nature Reserve. That is a transboundary conservation activity of CEMEX. If you're not familiar with CEMEX, we are one of the largest concrete and cement companies in the world with presence in North America, and this is the conservation legacy of the company. So let's start. And so this is the landscapes, like Rorik has mentioned. This is at the bottom of this image, you can see the mountains of Madera del Carmen. On the right hand is a part of the Big Bend National Park. The other part is in Mexico. So I like to show this image just for mention that there is no border there. It's something like imaginary for wildlife. It's just a continuous habitat there. And in the middle is the Rio Grande. So this is where we're going to start to talk about this transboundary landscape of our great corridor for wildlife. So what is El Carmen Nature Reserve? Basically, it's a private natural reserve that is managed by CEMEX. It's with 5 different ecosystems that can go from these grasslands all the way up to mountains and forests. It's the size of like Mexico City, 130,000 hectares, and it covers the major part of the operation is in Mexico, but also includes a portion in Texas. We have a full-time employees, around 15, and at today we have 20 years of operation. So it has been a long time, 22 years now for work. So where is located? Like we mentioned, we are located exactly in north part of Coahuila, Mexico, and very close, just on the other side of the Big Bend National Park in the United States. And it's considered as for being the Chihuahuan Desert, one of the most biodiversity-rich areas in the entire region. And it grows a lot of conservation areas around them, including Mexico and obviously the United States. And this is landscape is part of a corridor of protected areas inside in Mexico, like Madera del Carmen Ocampo in the United States, but obviously is the Big Bend National Park, just on the other side. And what is the objectives of what we do in El Carmen Nature Reserve? As we are 100% focused on biodiversity conservation. Also, we have some programs for restore habitat and native species like this black bear. And something very important to us is provide an outdoor classroom for conservation. That means that we receive scientists and students for be training in conservation, and also for do the research related with different aspects of wildlife management. Something very important also is provide environmental services like now related with climate change. It keeps a very important CO2 sinks. Also offsets part of the operating footprint of CEMEX in the world. And just for mention, I like to use this in order to put the perspective of these landscapes. Is this area of Madera del Carmen is something that is considered a sky island. Basically, it's a forest of the mountains that is surrounded for these grasslands and desert landscapes around the mountain. But I like to share some part of the story when CEMEX started to work in this place more than 23 years ago. But this is showing some of the historical aspects in the region. This area had been populated by the Native American for hundreds of years ago. And this is some of the images that you can find around the reserve that perhaps shows something related with bisons, like you can see in one of the images there. You know? So this is part of the history that obviously have a very important role. But how was in the past El Carmen Nature Reserve? Basically, like a lot of places that you can find in North Mexico, in our part, it was a place very rich in biodiversity, but also it was very impacted by human activities, like logging, for give you an example, overgrazing. It was a cattle and ranch operations, and also it was very important. A part of this operation, it was poaching in the area, but that's more specific, looking for some protein resources for the people who live there. It's like, and many species disappear from that particular region, including the desert bighorn sheep, the Mexican wolf. The black bear population was in the limits, and obviously one of the species that disappeared in this period, it was the American bison that it was disappeared in the late 1800, something like that, more than 100 years ago. And just for give you an example, at the top of the mountain, it was 5 logging camps. It was a very active way to living. And you can see those donkeys that was carrying the logs was mainly used for the mines that was around the area. So that was part of the life on that region. This picture was from the middle 1980s. So it was not really a long time ago that was all these activities was in place. And when CEMEX started to work in this reserve, the first thing that was done is, first of all, is to try to reduce the cattle, the animals that were there, like this donkeys, cattle, was a step to removal in order to rest the land. The second part is all the infrastructure that was there with the purpose for breed livestock and cattle was enhanced in order to provide a friendly infrastructure for wildlife that was not the focus on that place. And also something that was very important, we start to remove all the interior fences that was in the property in order to open the landscape. So that was the steps that start in the year 2000. And another component that I'm gonna be back on this image, more than 20,000 hectares of grasslands was restored with mechanical activities or prescribed fires, prescribed burns. So in order to return all the area that was overgrazed and with a lot of brush as product of the grazing was restored in order to return what this looks original. So this is an example. And also something that we start to do is in order to start a baseline inventory about what was there. So the biologists that work there start to make a register about the biodiversity in order to understand what is the best. So in this estimation about 500,000 plants, very close to the 300 birds, 80 plus reptiles and amphibians, and 80 mammals. So it was the inventory of vertebrates. And also we start to produce some of the habitats and wildlife programs, starting with forest and grassland restoration, primarily on the forest to avoid wildfires. That was at that moment a big issue. So we start to make some management in the forest in order to provide those catastrophic fires. Also something that we identified, the desert bighorn sheep was disappeared from the region in 1950s. So we start a program for reintroduce the desert bighorn sheep. The mule deer population was very low, and the pronghorn tipper was disappearing from the region. So we bring it back, and also we start a program for black bear protections, and the same for the golden eagle. And finally, the last component of the reintroduction projects was the American bison. So we focus on these big mammals in order to have sustainable habitat for those species. The rest of the species, all the rest of the animals will have, for sure, a good habitat for survival. So that was our approach. And something that we are very proud, the black bears protections is not the benefits that we have on there start to build up numbers, and those numbers start to move around the reserve and end up in the United States. And now the black bears that are back in Texas, the origin is this Madera del Carmen and Serranías del Burro. And for the desert bighorn sheep, it was built a brood facility of 100 hectares in order to have a group of bighorns breeding there, and the groups in then take bighorns from that location and start to release them in the surrounded mountains. At that time, it was very complicated in the year 2000 to move bighorns from Sonora for political reasons. So that's why we decided to put this reserve in order to breed them and put them back in the mountains. And currently we have more than 200 bighorns. And this is how we start in the year 2000 with the release of these bighorns in that place. And eventually we sent back these bighorns were released to the mountains. Well, this is, you're not very familiar with this process of capture and release. This is some of the bighorns that we are putting in a soft release pen in order to release them to the mountain. And currently, more than 100 bighorns are back in the wild and product of the release. So this is more or less one of the components that we have in this nature reserve. Just build up numbers and then release them to the wild. You know, this is a good example. It's the same with the mule deers. The population were very low when we start this project or this reserve. And we, with a cooperation agreement with Texas landowners, we bring some of mule deers to Mexico in order to build up numbers. And currently, the mule deer population is at the stable levels, the current capacity. And now these mule deers are dispersing on the region with the neighbors. The same case that we approached with the pronghorns. We end up in a good agreement with the New Mexico Game and Fish and make an interchange of desert bighorn sheep for pronghorns. So we bring up some pronghorns to the region in order to establish this population that was gone more than 50 years. So this is more or less the examples that we are following them. And we are really talk about this, how we are been working with the black bears. And this population is growing, and this is the source for some populations in the United States. And we are talking about opportunities on this reserve related with research. So more than, very close than now to 1,000 students had been in El Carmen for training or for some outdoor labs. And currently we have more than 16 master's and PhD theses from students from Mexican universities and also from United States University, for just giving an example. So this is a good place, and gives a good opportunity for the next generation of scientists and conservationists to receive the proper training with some real projects in the field. This is Ramiro Velasquez that at that time he was doing his master in science thesis with a desert bighorn sheep population. So in the pictures there, he's monitoring some desert bighorns. And something that is required by our corporation is that these projects have some level of certifications. So we have 11 projects certified since 2026, and sorry for the typo. And this is for the Wild Habitat Council that we have been certified in these projects. And something that in the conservation world is perhaps a rule. it's very complex. It's almost impossible that you do some conservation projects by your own or by your own entity. We are very fortunate to be collaborated with several institutions in Mexico and the United States in order to accomplish this work. And this is a good example of, this is a group related with fire management and institutions like Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, U.S. Fish and Wildlife National Park Service, CONAMP, and several entities and universities in Mexico have been part of this collaboration. The same with our neighbors. We were very close with our neighbors, and we have written agreements with landowners, either just for share good practices related with wildlife conservation. And also we have some agreements for collaborating with more details in activities related with management of the land or wildlife management. This picture is a workshop that we have with our neighbors and that we show good practices. And also they share with us how they are stewarding the land. So, well, I'm gonna take this opportunity in order just to see how beautiful is the landscape and how interconnected is this land between the two countries. The message that this place that we have been working the last 23 years is a good success of how putting together efforts and organization can be doing some conservation efforts that go beyond country borders. And coming back on the topic that Rurik asked me related with our Bison conservation project. This beautiful image reflects the past, but somehow also reflects the present of how important was the American bison for the Native Americans. And these pictures, it came very close to the mountains that you see in the vector. So that represents how in Mexico, North Mexico, this species was important in order that they put it in this kind of native paintings, you know. So before to talk about how the bisons, let me show a little bit, what was the reason of, because we decided to bring bisons to the place. After very close to 20 years of restorations, the grasslands return. And we start to see some signs in the vegetations. It was definitely the need of big grazers in order to put to work in the place. And when you start to see that the grass somehow is telling you, I need a grazer. And that was the decision that we say, well, it can be two places, either continue to prescribe fires or prescribe burns, but we definitely need a component in the habitat that helps us to restore the place. And the obvious reason was the bison. And so we started to do some conversations with the CONAMP and entities, and knowing that there was a group of bison located in Chihuahuan, Mexico, that the main purpose was a conservation herd, we start to say, well, we have a place that it has some components for another conservation herd. That's why it was selected the Carmen Nature Reserve. Rory can give you more information about that process, because it was not by a desire that we put the bison there. It was basically by a need that we bring the bisons. And for do that, we start to have preparation of the place. For almost a couple of years, we prepare the site for receive the bison, starting obviously with some fence improvement, because the bisons cannot be just running away. And also we built some release pens, and we have a prescribed burns for upgrade the habitat for the bison. So obviously there was a lot of negotiation internally and with the Mexican government and entities in order to have everything in place for receive these bisons, you know. And this happened on 2019, November. that we received the first group of 19 bisons that came from Chihuahuan Mexico, Jano, Chihuahua, and ended up in this soft release pen. You know, and it was very, I can describe the feeling, perhaps I don't have enough word in English, but when you see that an animal are there, immediately the bisons reflects that it was one of the missing part of the component. So it was a perfect fit for the landscape when you see the first animals there. And start to show some results. Perhaps this is not a great image or a great photograph, but it reflects a lot. This was the first calf of a bison born in the place after an absence of more than 100 years. So and that's what's very significant to us, that this herd that came from Chihuahua start to reproduce and breed there. And this, it was the first image of this 4 years ago, not that long ago. So how the population is growing? Currently, we have like 115 bisons. So it's not a really huge population at this moment, but we are very proud on that group, and it's growing. We're expecting a population growth around 20% per year. So it's behaving good. And something that we are learning, and sorry for the typos, home range. This at the beginning of this herd, like you see, there were some red colors, and there is a staff full-time following. The red dot shows where those bison were released, and the bison start to move and explore the place, start to move and form clans. And for 2 years, it was around 3,300 hectares, like it's more or less double in acres. And that's what shows where they are main moving. So they start to form the partner. And some years later, they start to magnify the place in order to now they are run for 1,200, 500 hectares. So perhaps this is one of the few herds that have enough room for behaves like a bisons in Mexico. So they are exploring, and something very interesting, they are moving in like 3 to 4 groups of clans, familiar clans. So they are having their own bison behaviors. The big bulls are by their own. So we start to see a lot of interactions that really give us a glimpse of what was the bisons before all the changes that humans make on those landscapes. So, and we are learning that every year of this herd. And like I mentioned, this herd is only have 4 years. So what is next, and what is expecting for the next year? And this is the habitat in red in the Carmen Nature Reserve, that it has some level of potential for bisons, according with what we are learning and the landscapes that is there. So we're expecting to have 40,000 plus hectares of bison landscape that can give us an opportunity to have 2 meta-population or subpopulation of bisons, and with the potential of a herd very close to 1,000 bisons divided in 2 groups, the north and the south part. So we are just in the beginning of what is the potential of for bison for this project, and perhaps it's going to be one of the largest bison populations in Mexico. You know, they're going to have enough room to do their work, that is restore the habitat, behave like bisons, and eventually have a strong presence of this species in Mexico. And I want to close this conversation with this image. This is, believe it or not, we have some snow in this latitude in Mexico, primarily in the winter. This picture was taken in the January 2001 to 21, and really become viral in Mexico when it was showed by the environmental minister. And something that it was very, very interesting, this picture helps to the Mexican population to learn and know that there were bisons in the country. So that was very present. It's something that I've been learning in this year that I have the fortune to work with bison, is how this species became one of the best ambassadors of the conservation work that we do, and reflects the effort of many entities, RORIC included, on how this species is returning to North Mexico and the country. So having said that, again, say thank you for inviting me to share this image with you of our work in the Carmen Nature Reserve. And I'm very welcome to questions. Yes, Samuel, go ahead.
Hi, Alejandro. Shami Anderson, Defenders of Wildlife. I'm in the field actually on a bison fencing project, but I had to come into your talk. I was looking forward to it, and I work closely with Rurik. Really awesome presentation. I was so intrigued to learn about the motivation, but also that you're over the years that you're seeing these animals behave as wildlife, as that ecological restoration on your prairie grasslands. I'm wondering, is it possible you've been in touch? You mentioned the partners. Have you been in touch with Donald Baird with Texas Wildlife and Parks? Any opportunity to introduce or to diversify your herd with Charles Goodnight animals?
Thank you for your question and your comments, and definitely is something that we need to analyze to diversify the herd, genetically wise. Is something that is in the scope, but for that kind of level is something that the Mexican governments are working with the counterpart in the United States. Like, you know, we are a private entity, and this project is part of a national restoration project. So definitely is something that we are open to receive new genetics in the herd. This group came from, like I mentioned, for Janos, but it was selected to bring the most diverse genetics in the group. So it was pre-selected the animals to see which ones are not related. Not we don't bring a clan like it was the preference. So we bring the animals with the most diversity genetic, and they have to form the new clan when they arrive to the place. But for sure, I think in some years we want to need to refresh the genetics of this group, because we start with 49 animals, 39.
Tremendous. Oh, thank you for that. And follow-up question. Well, a second question is in terms of social tolerance or working with the communities, the adjacent communities, what has been the level of acceptance or appreciation for you restoring bison in that part of Mexico? And what has been the hurdles, perhaps?
Yes. I think on that question is we are very fortunate that we have a novel amount of land, but one of the main comments that we have from the neighbors that they are in the cattle business is that basically say, please keep your herd in your area and be very careful of any diseases that they might carry. So that was the main concern. And for the rest of our neighbors, we are surrounded by communal land that is called ejidos in Mexico, and also some private ranches. We had not any issue with them at this moment, but we are working for keep the bison inside the boundaries. So that was the main reactions of some of the owners. Land owners say, well, just be careful with the sanitary issues with the bisons.
Sounds very familiar. Thank you so much. Really appreciate
You're
your presence.
welcome.
I'd love to connect with you offline too.
Sure, thank you.
And there's just a question in the chat. What's the biggest conservation issue that you face with regard to this herd now?
Well, at this moment, we are, let me find the proper words. We're in a comfortable zone at this moment because the population is growing at some levels, but eventually, I think one of the issues that we may face is when the herd arrives to the carrying capacity. Some years before, we're gonna need to identify another place in Mexico when we can take part of this herd and start another one in order for avoid some pressure on the habitat. So that's one of the points that we are analyzing at this moment with the proper authorities.
If I may add to that, the
Yes, go.
source population of this bison in Ateluno in Chihuahua has already reached the carrying capacity, but there are legal issues that do not allow to take bison. So there's a process now ongoing between the different agencies to figure out the way that it can legally remove bison to reduce the pressure on the ecosystem, because the bison is a keystone species, but too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, and it may be happening there. So it's good that there's enough land in Maderas del Carmen. It's huge. Only when you have been there, you realize how large that property is. And the other is to plan in advance, and they are doing that. So that shouldn't be a problem.
Thank you, Rurik.
There's another question in the chat. Do you have each individual genotype to select the individuals with highest genetic variation for the reintroduction at Maderas del Carmen? Are you monitoring levels of genetic variation and inbreeding at Maderas del Carmen after release?
Well, we have the genetic information of the founding herd. That's something that was part of the equation, how we decide the individuals that was selected for be the founding group. And eventually, we don't have like each individual that borns the genetic processes. Something that we are planning to do in the next months is the first roundup of the bisons in order to take the proper samples and start to understand more how the genetic wise and another aspect of the bison is evolving. That's something that is the plan. Gracias, Gabriela.
Shami, you had another question?
Yeah, also, Alejandro, I just wasn't, I was a little confused on the hectares versus acres. So they're currently occupying 20,000 acres, 150 animals, is that correct? But opportunities to expand?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and what is the expansion acres? Opportunities to expand to what number of acres?
It's around 80,000 acres.
Wow, that's tremendous. Okay,
Yes.
and then the other question is, it's pretty arid, and you mentioned climate change. What are the concerns about water availability, or are you doing any infrastructure for water? We've had this challenge even in the northern plains on some of our tribal lands, just making sure the animals have ample access to water. Has that been an issue for you all?
Obviously, it's an issue, and we are in a desert environment, and now we are facing a drought in the region. So the water is something that is on the top of our minds, and we have some water distribution system. If there is no water, there are not bison. That's simple. So it's something that we are working on a daily basis in order to keep the water source. We are very fortunate to have a good water steward in our property. And as soon as that we open a new sites, the first thing is to have the water resolved, So that's for sure, and it's gonna be for all the herds that I know, something that you need to have in a very good way resolved before to have any bison. And just for give you an example, the properties that we're working now, it used to be a cattle operations more than 20 years ago. They used to have like 1,000 cattle heads over there. So it was a good water infrastructure that was at that time for cattle, but now with that water infrastructure is served for bisons. And obviously we are not thinking to have that amount of cattle. So we are in a conservative way in order to keep the habitat in good balance.
Super helpful. Another maybe dumb question here. Does Mexico have any, and Rurik, I probably have asked you this in the past, but any kind of declaration of bison as wildlife? Is there any benefit to having that status versus like in the US, if they're livestock designated or agricultural, they don't get the same conservation benefits as if they're wildlife designated. But I'm not understanding Mexico in terms of what that policy or that designation could look like from a state government opportunity.
Yeah. Well, the bison is considered in Mexico as a wildlife species and is considered under an endangered species for Mexico or for some level of conservation, but it's something that eventually will change, but at this moment is considered as a wildlife species and follow all the normativity or laws related with wildlife. So that is the status. How good is that? I'm not the proper person to answer that question. I have obviously my opinions, but it's not the subject that is wrong.
Another chat question for you. Long term, as the two subpopulations increase, is there a management plan to allow assisted migration between the two units?
Well, I would like to say that perhaps it's going to be like the unnatural migrations for the herds. Unfortunately, the landscape in Mexico is very, let me find the word, very degraded, and also it was with a lot of barriers, like fences. So there is not like a corridor for bisons. Those things, I think, only if as a species we become extinct, humans, that kind of images of bison's migration will return. But the reality is that we're gonna need to help with superpopulations that somehow are gonna be enclosed, and we're gonna need to help those movements from two sides to the other. That is the reality. So that we face in Mexico. Yeah. Okay, Tony.
Unmuted, yeah. Hi. Oh. Okay. Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. One has to do with watershed. I believe what percentage of your area is actually forested? I'm curious about that. And I assume, of course, you're doing forest restoration. You mentioned that earlier. And seeing that forest cover is absolutely critical for water conservation, particularly during a drought period. I have a couple of questions. That's my first question. I'll let you answer that first, and then I have a second question.
Okay, well, related with forest, it was in the top of the mountain. It is a good coverage of forest. It's pine and oak forest. That mountain is around perhaps more than 50% of forest. The project you see in the bison is in the lowlands, and this is something that we definitely are protecting related with the forest with fire management programs that we are working in a very close cooperation with the Mexican entities like the CONAM, that is the Protected Areas Agency for Mexico, in order to keep those forests for the importance of particularly the water research, because we depend of those mountain landscape for recovery or water source. Definitely, it's something that we are very focused. Yes.
Yeah, that's very good to hear. I'm quite interested because in our project, we are also very tied up in watershed issues. The other question I had to do with predators, the introduction of, the predator-prey relationship. Have you considered down the road in the future, obviously, the reintroduction, for example, of cougar population and possibly even grizzly bear, because I believe grizzly were that far south, if I'm correct. That may mitigate some of the management issues or contribute to management issues when the bison population reach maximum.
Yes, well, we have an established cougar population in the mountains, and all the same with black bears. And looks like they are not at this moment any concern for the bison. I see in the behavior of the bison related with the black bears and how they move or protect the calf. So once the bison reach some level of size, the bison don't have too much to worry for a black bear or a cougar. And perhaps the calf that they are surrounded by big all the herds, so they are sparked. And related to other species like the grizzly bear, I think it's more a social component and needs to be faces with the neighbors in order to reintroduce a third predator like a grizzly bear or a Mexican wolf. For sure, there are good potential, but it's more a social aspect than a wildlife aspect.
Well, we face similar issues up here too, although there are native predator populations in the area that we're proposing, both wolf and grizzly. But in your case, I suspect it's going to come down to you having to make the selections of reestablishing herds elsewhere, as you mentioned earlier. Anyway, excellent presentation, by the way. I really enjoyed it. Is it possible to come and visit the reserve?
Yes, it is possible for scientific purposes or academic purposes. We are always are glad to receive guests. For example, Rurik has been visiting us for us several times, and we are always glad to receive from the scientific point of view and universities and also colleagues on the conservation area. So that's possible. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Were there any final questions for Alejandro? All right. Well, thank you so much for a really fabulous presentation today. And it's so good. Sometimes we get embroiled in all the troubles and things. And so it's amazing to hear some really good news stories. And oh, Shami, I see you've got your hand up again.
No, I'm clapping. I was just I learned so much. Excellent presentation and great questions by everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you again, Alejandro.
Thank you very much. I'm glad for present this, and thank you very much, Rurik, for inviting me to this presentation. It was a pleasure to share a part of our work. Thank you very much.
Gracias a ti, Alejandro. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes.
Gracias.
Gracias. And just a reminder to everybody that if you did enjoy today's presentation and want to support us, I just dropped a link in the chat. You can make a donation to Great Plains Conservation Network to support more webinars like this. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Trip to Mexico.
Yeah.